Are you ready to go again? So let me zoom this in and go with just a little bit to refresh. So this is the Navigation City Manager, so our slightly modified for the purpose of this lecture version of the City Manager. It is using the Unity Engine AI, and we created a reference to the NavMesh service from the NavMesh components package. We have a couple of prefabs ready. One is a prefab for a flat tile, another one for a slope up, stairs going up, slope down, stairs going down. Just to keep everything in context, so we have flat tiles, so we have stairs going up, we have stairs going down, and that's it. I keep this reference here because it's easier, since Navigation City Manager is a singleton, which we can access from anywhere. We can have each individual block grab the prefab it needs here directly from the Navigation City Manager, in case you're wondering. Our new city is now larger, so it's 40 by 40 by 40. And here in update function, I've added this detection of space being pressed, space bar, and we're going to bake the mesh. So nav mesh, build nav mesh. Okay, so that's the one function, one method that you need to be aware of in case of real-time runtime baking. Okay, let's try it. So let's give Unity a chance to get up to speed. Okay, running it. Okay, I have one big mess of roads and connections, and it's done. So let me highlight NavMesh surface. It doesn't show anything right now, but if I go into the game window, press space key, voila! Didn't take long, and the whole thing is already navigable. So I think that's quite cool. Let's drop the agent back in. Actually, let's maybe do it like this. Let's put the agent in the scene. And this is this tile is also okay. Let's see. We have a start location transform in the scene, so I'd like to make this special. I'd like to have the Nav City Manager actually put this tile there automatically. Why? It will become a little bit more clear later, but the timing is important, as you can see, so we have to wait for something to be finished. Our recursive city building code is kind of difficult to track in terms of, okay, when is it actually finished? You'd have to add additional code to track just that. So we're going to go the simple way and just give it a little bit of time to make sure that it's finished, and then do something else. But that's just foreshadowing, so we'll be using coroutines for that. So I will delete this nav tile here, and in Nav City Manager now I have a building prefab as we always did, but this time it's going to, okay, sorry, a nav tower block, nav tile, road prefab. So let me just get back and show you where this is coming from. So we have a road prefab and we have a building prefab. Building prefab, we'll try to incorporate some buildings later on into this, because our road prefab also uses our city building array, so that we can make the roads be aware of buildings that are sorry? We wouldn't like roads going straight through buildings, so that's why I had to make some modifications there too, and feel free to go over it and see how exactly it's done. Very similarly to what we've been doing all the time. But another thing that's important here is that I have a public field start location. This is just a transform. It's made public, so having a reference to the Nav City Manager anywhere, I can refer to this location. So let's start using that. Let us first go into the start function and place that tile at that location. So this is called road prefab. And I'd like to place it there at the start location. Okay. Oops. Okay, so let's see if it does what I wanted it to do. Yeah, okay, so it put the tile now automatically and the whole thing spawned, which is great. So the additional benefit now is this start location. Now we know that there's a crossroads there. We also know that hopefully there's a path to this location from every single point else in the system. Because roads were made so that they don't cross each other. So basically you can look at this like it's all tributaries of this kind of like one crossroads. So let's see if that works. Let's put the let's actually maybe move on to the timing issue that I mentioned. So in situations like this where okay, let me just remove myself. In situations like this where you don't know exactly how long something will take, because keep in mind that when you build the procedural city, you put one block in and then it spawns other blocks, and then the other blocks will run other functions, and this might not happen all in one frame, and it actually most certainly doesn't happen in one frame. So you have to have another timer somewhere else to be able to make a delay before we bake our nav mesh. Like in this first case, that's what we need to worry about. So sometimes in Unity, have you used coroutines a lot before? Was it officially covered? What coroutines are basically functions which allow us to pretend that we have a separate thread running. It's not exactly a multi-threading, because with multi-threading you run into all kinds of different problems, like synchronization of the threads is pretty complicated, and you cannot actually use most of the Unity data between threads. So this is actually improved now, but well, it's a kind of like a big other topic. However, in most cases you just use coroutines, which pretends that the code is executing separately. What happens is just Unity goes very quickly between your main rendering loop and the other code in the coroutines, and just kind of like switches so that we can actually manage the timing separately and not worry in a coroutine about what's happening with rendering and everything else. So official blurb is, it's like a function that has the ability to pause execution and return control to Unity, but then to continue where it left off on the following frame. Okay, well, as you start using them, you'll get a better sense of what they actually are. So they can be used for animations, for delays, and in our case, we'd like to pause for 3 seconds before we hit the navmesh baking function. So this is a simple example of a coroutine. What do we have here? We have something that's being called from the start function, which is actually starting the coroutine. And the coroutine is named example coroutine. It is of the type IEnumerator, so this is the way to declare a coroutine. And this is a functionality inside the coroutine that is kind of happening on its own kind of timeline. And the important distinction there is we have the ability to do something like this. So yield return new wait 4 seconds find, which means that after we run this instruction here, let me zoom in, maybe be a little bit clearer. So this is the coroutine, and this is initializing the coroutine, starting it. So this yield return keyword allows us to stop execution in this coroutine and let the rest of the game happen as it happened, and come back after 5 seconds. So let's do something like this here. So IEnumerator, let's call it timed navmesh bake. So I need to get used to this zoom thing to make it not to think about it. Okay, it's highlighting that it's not returning a value, which is fine for now. So what we'd like to do first is instantiate our road prefab. So I'm going to take it out from the start function and put it into our coroutine. Meanwhile, in the start function, I'd like to start coroutine. And there's different ways of starting coroutines. You can refer to them via coroutine type fields, or you can call them by their name. In case of a coroutine which doesn't have any parameters, it doesn't really matter. Now, if you have more than one parameter in your coroutine, then you have to be a little bit more wary how you do this. But in this case, this works fine. So we instantiate road prefab start location, and now we do this yield return new, and we can use the wait for seconds function. Let's give it 3 seconds. It's a float, yeah. And then after this is done, we can move our build navmesh function there. So this is now should be fairly safe. This is okay. There's still a little bit of a danger that this mesh will, road will not be built in 3 seconds. Well, what will happen then is that not all of the blocks will be in place and seen, and the navmesh will be incomplete. So we can maybe see if we can simulate this. So let's put a very short time. I'll put just a fraction of a second there. And let's see if what I've been afraid of is going to happen. Okay, let's give it a chance. Okay, and I'm zooming in now, and you can see that indeed we didn't wait long enough. At the stage where we baked our mesh, only these blocks were present, and now we have a problem. We cannot really use most of these roads. So I think this should be demonstration enough that you know, this coroutine here is a good idea. And a lot of the time when you're doing initialization functions, you might want to put them on an enumerator. It gives you a little bit more control. So this also prevents you from locking your rendering in the beginning, having stutters in the beginning of the start of the scene. If you do it kind of gradually and control it in a coroutine. So let's add another. Let's add another wait there after this. Well, actually, yeah, I changed this to 3 seconds now. Let's save and test it now. Well, 3 seconds should be plenty in the world of modern PCs. So yeah, seems we've got everything covered. So the way we've generated these roads, let's see, the start location should be the pointer, yep, to our initial crossroads. So this was the original place where the road just split off in 4 directions, and everything kind of went from there. So in some cases, based on the probability, based on the random dice toss, the path can turn to the right or to the left. The way I set it up is just to make it as simple as possible. We don't really have other 4-way crossroads unless the paths just happen to be like alongside and just touch each other, like in this case. It might have little areas of flat terraces, just because the lots of flat blocks were placed from different branches. Okay, so that's a basic use of coroutine there, and you know, let's maybe add a little bit of a few buildings in there, just to kind of like keep it in line with the overall idea of a city. And let's use a little bit of parameterization for this. So let me make just a public function called build city. We'll give it a parameter iterations. Public void. I don't want it to return any value, and what I'd like to happen is what we did in our previous. Let me just open an example. Of our previous city manager. So what we were usually doing is have some kind of a loop. We'll do it a little bit different now, but just to save us maybe opportunity to make a error, I'm just going to copy this section from the city manager into our navigation city manager, and I'm going to place it inside the build city function. I don't need this nested loop now, so I'm just going to clear it. What I would like to do is just use a randomization to place a couple of buildings in. So let's just call it a I between 0 and iterations. So this loop will the length you know, of the amount of the number of iterations here is going to be defined by the parameter of this build city function. So I'm doing a little bit of refactoring of what we've been doing before in a way and parameterizing it so that there's a little bit more control. We can change things without having to rewrite code. So we will not use I directly in the positioning. What I'll do is let's call it random x, and let's make it a random value from a range. So very similar to what you are doing in your creative assignment. Let's do it between -15 and 16. If you remember in the float version of this, okay, in the int version it's inclusive and exclusive. So if I want to have values going between -15 and 15, I have to do this. So that's cool. And random z is going to be similar. So I just like to pick any number on the flat plane within this square, going from -15 to 15. And this I can leave because we have some kind of a profile array there. It will be so building prefab. That's all good. Only here we're going to use random x and random z. So this should be clear what's happening there. So let's go back to our coroutine, which sets up the whole thing. Let's add another little weight. Well, actually, what would make sense in this case is do something before we even do the road. So we're going, before we do the road, we'll build the city. And I'd like to have 20 buildings, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so we're giving a chance for the buildings to appear. The buildings update the city planning array. Then we wait for 3 seconds. We build the roads. The roads also update the city array. Then we wait for 3 seconds and we bake the nav mesh. The buildings have not been set up as navigation static, so they will not be included in this setup in the nav mesh baking. So let's see what happens now. There's a little danger in doing this way. Can anybody think of what might happen, might go wrong? And it went wrong the first time. Brilliant. But also something else went wrong. So, okay, let's see. Okay, it doesn't like that pursue target is not assigned. So let's remove this agent there for a second. It's cool. Okay. Okay, object reference not set to instance or objects. I've forgotten to forgotten to set up the. Oh yeah, okay. Navigation City Manager is not using deluxe tower blocks. It's using nav tower block. Wrong type. Nav tower block is this new type of building. It's not very different from what we've been using before. It's just made to be compatible with the Nav City Manager. It's a bit awkward, but I just wanted to keep these scenes all together and all working together in this one project. So sometimes we need to kind of duplicate things a little bit. Let's see if that fixed it. Okay, so now we have a bunch of randomly placed buildings. We have roads, and if all went well, okay. we also should have the nav mesh baked. So this is promising. How am I with time? Okay, so we still have, we're okay. Any questions about the coroutine or the order of execution, or like why even we bother doing this way? I think I kind of demonstrated why we need to do it. Yep. Well, that's precisely the reason, and I'm glad that you're asking. If that hasn't been clear yet, that's exactly why we have this city array. That all these little components, blocks, tiles, stairs, and building blocks are basically checking before they place themselves. Right? So that's where we have set slot and check slot. So if a if a roadblock is being placed, let me go back to that. Okay, let me open that script. The relevant script in this case is root tile. So this is the little building block for the roads. So what's happening is the first root block, root tile, sorry. The first root tile that we place in the scene has recursion count equal to 0. Everything else that's placed later will have a larger value. That's how we track, you know, how many we've already placed, and we can like limit the whole process. But as soon as we place this new tile, actually sorry, before we place that tile, we check with the Nav City Manager if the position we'd like to place the block in is empty. If it is empty, so that's why there's a exclamation mark, because we need to negate this. If this value is false, which means that there's nothing there, then after negating it, it will be true, and then we can proceed with this bunch of code, which is, okay, I'm building here, so I'll tell Nav City Manager to set this to true. So I'm filling the position in the array to let all the other blocks know that this has already been taken, and then I instantiate my prefab. So there's kind of like a in parallel process happening there with this data structure, our data array, the city array. So if you place some other prefabs that take some space in your game, you need to make sure that you run this set slot for all the blocks that are covered by this object. Does this make sense? So, well, I don't know. I mean, you can do whatever you like. You can maybe create a a big floating building that has is just one complex mesh, but it you know that it takes a certain area in space. So then maybe you need to run a loop just to make sure that the extents of the building are covered and all the cells of the array are set to true. And this way, anything that you build afterwards will not use those cells, or just if any block gets placed, what will happen is that it will destroy itself, because this is what it's happening in the other. If this slot is actually empty, then destroy the object. That's what's happening here. Actually, this might actually not be necessary. I think I'm possibly just found a bug, but any more clarification on this, or maybe if it becomes more concrete as you work, I'm hoping next week we can do a little kind of lab session where we everybody works on their projects and they can share screens and maybe kind of attack the whole city building problem together and see different approaches. So if this kind of thinking is still unclear and giving you trouble, it's a good time to really go into the root tile script, go into the tree tower block, because that's a similar approach, and then see if you understand what's happening there. It's a good idea to maybe make something simpler, which is not using the building profiles, not using recursion, but still uses the nav, still uses the city array. So maybe if you're looking for a little mini challenge, how could you create a block at specific coordinates, maybe kind of like a rectangular or like different shapes, and still be able to update the city array so that everything that comes afterwards will know that everything, and we will observe that there's already something at this location. It's a basic kind of like a model of the world in a data structure. A very simple example of it. You'll be dealing a lot with it. Yeah. Hi, John. Yeah, I think maybe for some people it's a little bit. So I've been zooming it so the recording should have clear text on everything. Okay. So let's make something happen with this nav mesh that we now have generated. Let's see. Let's maybe use some randomization and create something like a little bit of a crowd scene. Our nav mesh surface is ready, our buildings are ready. You see that the buildings are also avoided in case there's anything happening on the ground plane here. The agents will be avoiding it as well, but for the moment we won't be placing any agents there. So let's see what we can actually do. One idea is like a simple idea to just fill the space with our agents would be to go into the root tile and coordinate with the nav city manager when the nav mesh is ready to use, because that's important. We shouldn't be placing the agents when the nav mesh is not ready at all. That could be a cause of problems. So let's go to navigation city manager. And oh, I see I already have it here. So let's add a nav mesh ready flag, which is false by default, and make it public. So this way any object in the scene that is looking for the nav mesh can check first before doing something. So my idea for this would be to go into the root tile and to its update function. All of this here is happening in start, and in update nothing is really happening. So let's do the check. Well, first of all, let's make a. We already have a nav city manager reference. Let's see where it's. Okay, so in start function, at a certain stage we populate this nav city manager variable with the instance from the singleton. So we just access the static field called instance of Navigation City Manager class, and there's only one of these objects there. So this is what we can use to find our flag later. So in update, what I'd like to do is first check if this Nav City Manager is not null. So if it hasn't been assigned, if we haven't gotten it, because well, it won't happen in this case. I can probably I can delete it because start will happen before the first update. But it's still a good check in case something happens. So if Nav City Manager is null, is not null, then do a logical check. That flag that we just created. So Nav City Manager nav mesh ready. So if this is true, so I could type it like this explicitly. If nav city manager is equal true, I can just leave it like this because this value is hopefully true. So if nav city manager nav mesh ready, then we'd like to do something about spawning spawning agents from this tile. But do we want to do it from every tile? Like maybe spawning things on the stairs might be a little bit overcomplicated. So there is a variable here in every root tile called mySlope, which is assigned 0 if it's a flat tile. So I'm going to add this conditional. So if the nav mesh is ready and if mySlope is equal 0, let's do something again that's random because we don't want to make this happen deterministically every frame. Let's do int rando is random range 0 1000. Let's use a larger range now, and now if rando is less than 5, so that's not going to happen very often hopefully, we will spawn an agent. Okay, the root tile doesn't have a reference to the prefab for nav agent, but nav city manager should have. Is it? And if it doesn't, then we'll make it. So I went back to Navigation City Manager, added a public game object agent prefab. Okay, we will have to make sure that we populate this in inspector, obviously. Okay. So now going back to the root tile script, agent prefab, and where would we like it to? At the current location of the current root tile object. Okay, so that will take care of initialization, or sorry, spawning of the agents. Hopefully this is not going to be flood the system, but then we have to also expand our pursue target script. Sorry, yeah, okay, I'll you still have replying to Tom here, so if anybody still needs a little bit of time, or anytime today is fine for the submission, and if you really need a little bit of extra time and want to do tomorrow, that's also okay. I'll try to get back to everybody today. Also, well, okay, let me just finish this. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit all over the place. So Okay, so we've instantiated our agent, but now we have to add something to the pursue target, because we'd like to give all our agents some kind of position to track. So here in start, hopefully the nav mesh is ready, so we can just give each agent a single destination position. What it's going to be? It's going to be the starting position. So we will need to have get a reference for the city manager as well. Sorry, navigation city manager. Okay, zoom. Come on. So the same way as in route tile, I need a reference to the navigation city manager. I'm gonna add it to pursue target. Pursue target is kind of the component that we stuck on the agent. You know, maybe we should have called it agent behavior or something that's more specific to agent, but for the moment let's just do it like this. So navigation city manager also requires being in the grid city namespace. Okay. So all of this code has to go inside the namespace, and then the bad error is going to go away. Yeah, and when we start, nav city manager is equal navigation city manager instance. It's not a function, it's a field. Once we have the instance, we can use it. And start location is the position we're looking for. Keep in mind, start location is a transform, so we actually need to position. And this is fine, and this is perfect, because position is a world space position, it's not local position, and destination needs to be in world space coordinates. So, well, fingers crossed. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but it's kind of okay. We've created a prefab in nav city manager. We need to populate it now. Agent prefab is empty, so let's go and stick it there. Start location is provided. Okay. Agent itself, just have a quick look. I'll open the prefab and have a quick look at it. It's got a capsule, it's got a collider, it's got a nav mesh agent. That's important. This needs to be there for anything to happen. And it has a pursue target. Destination is none, because this is going to be assigned at real time, at runtime. Okay, so buildings built, roads built, and I'm not seeing anything happening. Oh, I know. Why? Because the flag that we created, we've never modified it, so how to let the rest of the world know that the nav mesh bake is complete is, well, first give it a chance, give it another 3 seconds, and then nav mesh, what's this? Nav mesh ready, okay. Okay, so after this is everything is said and done, you can update the flag, and now hopefully each root tile block will every frame, if it's the right type of tile, and if it gets a low enough random number, it will spawn something. There's also another problem that we didn't put any expiry date on those agents, so after a while we would expect things to get busy or too busy. Okay. Whee! And yeah, they keep coming and they keep coming, and it's like the opposite of social distancing. And also I don't like how large these agents are. Yeah, I try. It was more trying to get this road to build correctly. I have to say this procedurality can be backfire sometimes, but that's because I wanted to keep the code simple. Yeah. COVID City. Okay. Haha. I don't like how this agent is, like, those agents are huge, so I'm going to reduce the smile even, this size even more, smaller. Come on. And yeah, I don't know, I think that's going to be okay. Well, let's try a little bit more of visual variation and randomness. So what could we do? We could also take a little break as well. How is everyone for break? Or should we just keep going and finish earlier? I'll keep going, okay. Okay, how would we make all our agents different? Well, we could somehow do it centrally when we create and add an additional method that sets the color of the agent or something like this, but in this case it probably makes more sense to just keep it all local. So pursue target, let's just try to give it a random color. So to do that, we need to, if you remember, to change the color of an object. We need to access its render in order to be able to access its main material, in order to be able to access the color of the material. Or we might have used the common material for all the agents and then modified that, but you know, this will not give us variety. So instead, and I'm sure you've done it a million times, some of you at least, so private renderer, yes, rend, and actually this happens only once, so we don't necessarily need to hold a variable for this. We can do this all in start. So we'll just make a local variable renderer rend, get component of type render. Okay, zoom. Oh shit. Okay, thank you. I keep forgetting those hotkeys in the heat of the moment. It's kind of. Are you seeing what you should be seeing? This zoom kind of. Yep. Okay. Get component render. So we have the render. Now we can get the material. Yep. And now we can just there's a nice random function which actually does colors. Easy peasy. Okay. This will happen in the first as soon as the object gets created. So we've made it smaller. Did I save that? Oops. I don't actually need this agent here, so let's just see if it sticks. No. Yeah, it's okay. Oh, okay. Complicated city. Okay, we see some of the objects are not moving. I've noticed that the larger the nav mesh is, the more weirdness happens. So I'm thinking there's two things that might be happening there. Either the nav mesh is corrupt in some ways that some of them don't see a clear path, or something is happening that we're overflowing, because this doesn't happen for small meshes, only for larger ones. Additionally, maybe there's something in the placement of the agents. So I'd have to look into that. If anybody finds the answer to that, I appreciate. If you find any bugs with this entire setup, let me know. Okay. Not sure how many of you are following up and recreating this. So there is a finished version on the Git repo, GitHub repo, under the branch, I think week 9 complete. So let me maybe go back a little bit. We were talking about because now we have a kind of a spawning process, but we haven't done any effort of limiting it. So that could be a problem. So how about in the start we actually suicide the agent with a delay. So destroy this game object with a delay. Remember there was this nice overload which to this method which gives you an additional time t after which to kill the object. So 10 seconds should be enough to not be too obvious. So let's try that. Well, this city didn't come out very nicely, so this is again with randomness. you have to be wary that it might not, might just kind of like die immediately. One attempt I did at controlling this extinction at the very beginning, kind of dead on arrival city, is in root tile. Remember, we have this recursion count. I renamed it from something that was called level in the tree tower block. Now it's called recursion count because it's a better name for it, and it is something that starts at 0 and hopefully caps out at 100, or maybe there just won't be any more blocks, so it never gets to that 100. But we can use this recursion count to maybe make it more likely to spawn in the very beginning. So I tried to do this here in, okay, let me zoom in, sorry. So this is the start of a root tile. Again, here we're mapping from the world space position to the city array. If you remember, I have to do something special there for downslope because of the way the prefab is set up. Unfortunately, this is just kind of like a quirk. You don't have to worry too much about it. So here, in case this is happening for the first block, which is the initial crossroads, so we're not interested about it. Here I introduced this biasing factor. So max level minus recursion count divided by 15. So max level is 100. In this case, recursion count will go from 0. So in the beginning it will be 0 divided by 15. So maybe we'll divide by 10. That will be a larger number. And then this corrector I add to the limit. So I randomize a number, and it's very likely that we'll move forward. I mean, it's 8/10, but we even increase the chances by adding this corrector. That's why it's a hack, but you know, it works. Similarly, later on, wherever else we have, oh yeah, this is a bit strange because, okay, the slope left or right split, so we also make it, we add the corrector to the random value in this case because we're looking at larger than certain values. So to make it more likely, we just add an extra value to bias it. So I changed the division there to 10, so hopefully now it will be less likely to run into this quick extinction. Let's try it. This is the kind of you know, little workarounds that, you know, I had to actually do quite a lot in there, and I originally wanted to do a full live code of this root tile, but it just wouldn't have been a good payoff. I think it would be more confusing than helpful, and at the same time, you know, it's still fairly similar to what you did in the lab test. So okay, so the city is large enough. The agent spawning is working okay. We see we occasionally get set destination can only be called on active agent that has been placed on the nav mesh. So something somewhere is not working okay with the agent placement. I think the whole thing will be a little bit better visually if we reduce the agent a little bit more. So once again, I'm going to go into the agent, open prefab. I'm going to make it 15. 1. What the heck? So hopefully by now you kind of, I know the recursive code took a little bit of initial learning curve, but I think you know, by now you can see that you can do different things with it. So we've got buildings, we've got road, all done with a similar kind of approach. We're each next block just adds another one. So okay, so this seemed to have worked. We have a little mecca here in the beginning, in the center, some kind of a group gathering, and the agents are all arriving from all those different tributaries. Let's have a quick look at this nav mesh surface again. Okay. So this is how it came out with these settings. Like we could modify it and rebake it. So let me just fix another one last issue. Is what happens if we build a building at the very center, and it will go over this starting location. What if there's a building there and then we want to try to build roads from the same location? So to prevent that, we're gonna go back to our navigation city manager. Remember our build city function. Like this call, we can change the parameter very easy to make this a much busier city, but I'd like to protect this from protect the center of the city from buildings. So just another loop, just another conditional that you've seen so many of. So random, if random x is larger than say -3 and random x is less than 3, and this is all ends. Random z is larger than -3, and random z is less than 3. Missing. No, I think there's not enough. Yep. So if that's the case, it's only one instruction here. Actually, wrong. We need to negate that. So everywhere except for this middle square, we're free to put buildings in. And let's actually crank up the number of the buildings to 50. See what happens. Is there going to be any? I think there's a little bit of corruption to the roads because of the buildings. Okay. Alright, so much a bit more moody, more shadows, and more city. So you can obviously, like, the whole final project assignment is to test your ability to, you know, just take the pieces that you are familiar with and maybe learn a few new ones that you will need, and see what you can, you know, combine to make a valid experience. So it's kind of like a bit more indie game oriented rather than gaming industry, but I think it's a good, it's going to be interesting, and hopefully you can learn the aspects that you're interested in and maybe develop it in a give your creativity a chance. So the middle of the city is now empty of buildings, so we're safe, and this is happening. Okay. There's no rigid bodies, so the humanoids don't actually push on each other, so they kind of like clip into each other. So in this case, this wasn't a problem. If we had a I mean, the agent is doing some certain bit of avoidance there, but you can see that at the end of the day, let's see. Yes. Well, it reaches a certain amount of saturation after a while because, as you noticed, here we kill each agent after 10 seconds. So, so there's a couple of numbers that here, are affecting the. Well, first of all, is the size of the whole thing. So, like with this kind of like we've just built a system. It's almost like a simulation. So, we can kind of like. We can almost talk about simulating crowds, or maybe like making a little bit of a quantitative experience there, using basic processes and stochastics. Well, we can control the spawning rate. The spawning rate is controlled in root tile because this is where the agent gets spawned. So let me just modify this quickly in updates. This rando here, if it's less than 5 out of 1,000, then we spawn. What if we make it 50? That will definitely become more busy. Okay, yeah, we can try that. Not sure what is going to happen with the, it doesn't seem like a necessarily healthy thing to do. Were you looking for bigger radius of avoidance, or? So there should be much more spawning happening now, and yes, indeed, you can see that there are like much bigger crowds being generated. I'm not sure if there's some kind of a these all should have slope 0, so everybody's going downtown. Okay, so you want me to put this on the prefab? Okay, well, sure. Experimentation is a way of learning. Any specific size? Something matching the actual objects, right? So capture. Okay. I think this is going to be a anyway. You can try it yourself. So. For some reason the city is not well, the calculation, there's some optimization going on, and no, it didn't actually seem to do anything. Something is broken though, because I can see that not all of the I don't know why there's a okay. We have an agent floating in the air. I'm not sure this came from this obstacle or I don't know about the implementation. I would assume that there's been a little bit of maybe GPU aided calculation, because these things tend to be fairly obvious to parallelize, because you have lots of identical objects that are doing the same thing. So this is a good application of compute shaders. Okay, there's a lot of emergent things happening, like those little mini groups forming here. I'm not 100% sure why. In some cases it happens. I think I think at some stage when you like push it this way, which is what it probably wasn't meant to be to do. It might just expose its limitations. So yeah, play around with changing the agent prefab by all means. See if you get interesting results. Like that's one way to kind of see what the system has to offer. Okay. Let me kind of go back a little bit to the baking options there. So yeah, I tried that and it didn't seem to make a big difference. I'm guessing if you put a obstacle on the same object, it will be automatically ignored. I mean, it kind of doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's always good not to trust Unity too much. Yeah. So this NavMesh surface, keep in mind that distinctions. Keep in mind the distinction that we're doing this all via the NavMesh components. So otherwise you wouldn't be able to do a runtime bake or update. Actually, one thing I didn't mention is the first time you update the NavMesh, you do the build NavMesh. Then if you want to maybe update it after a while, you do update NavMesh. There is some distinction. I'm not sure, perhaps it's asynchronous and maybe less of a performance hit than recalculating the whole thing. It seems build NavMesh just pre-generates the NavMesh data object. Then once you have that object, you can update it. So hopefully less of a performance hit. So you won't see a stutter where you want to suddenly recalculate your levels NavMeshes. Other things that you can do is NavMesh modifier and NavMesh modifier volume. So I give you links here to the documentation directly from the Unity GitHub. So these allow you to change the properties of some of the areas. For example, we might have danger areas like lava. I'm not sure this is a sample of it. Let's see. Yeah, so this is kind of an example there. This object has a area type of lava, and depending on how you configure the agents, this might affect the path calculations. And then real time, you might maybe change it later to change the mesh again. So there's definitely lots more complexity, and if you have a specific idea that you're implementing, for example, lava caves, where you know that the lava level will be rising and falling, for example, then maybe these volumes, NavMesh modifiers, will be of use. And then the logical thing is to read up on them and see if you can find an example and so on. I haven't used this component myself before, so I'm not that experienced with it. Oh, okay. A very important point that if I did mention it, but the NavMesh surface there. Here you can see that you have this choice of using colliders or render meshes. So do remember, if you go with render meshes, they need to be runtime read and writable. So that's because they will be basically checked when the NavMesh is regenerated. Otherwise, you'll get errors. And here, like, what happens if I change the voxel size, for example? How would it affect us? So let's make it something pretty coarse-grained and see how it changes the calculation. We can imagine that it'll be like a little bit, everything will be a little rougher, and indeed it is. It just made a big mess of it. This was definitely not enough to generate a valid mesh, and you can see the poor agents are lost. So how about less than that? So for example, you might have like a little bit of elevation in the terrain, because terrain can be also marked as nav OC. This is still coarse, but it's enough to be able to generate like a functional nav mesh. It just kind of breaks down in some areas. Here the agent possibly got stuck because the passage is not okay. We can maybe try to change it now, change the humanoid properties, change the radius to much smaller, see if it will help. Well, then you might need to like play with those kind of options. So I think this 0.5 was actually a kind of a good middle of the ground value. So you can use layers. Remember layers. You can also specify which surfaces to use for your path calculation using layers. So layers, as we talked about when we talked about physics, they can have different uses. So remember that you can maybe have a workflow for yourself that will help you separate the active areas of the level to things which are purely visual, and they don't need to be considered. So layers would be a reasonable thing to use there. Okay, let's see what I missed out yet, and maybe we can kind of like a recap. We've done a simple example of coroutines. Right. Okay, we've added the people. Some things to remember when you are using the NavMesh component. So make sure there's the active NavMesh already. Make sure that the NavMesh agent is placed somewhere on the NavMesh, and the destination needs to be set, and then it hopefully will work. The Harrison book. How many of you are actually using it? Like I'm hoping that there's at least a big chunk of you that got it and are reading it, because I think it's a good. It has good emphasis on C# in the context of Unity. So no, unfortunately, I couldn't. I didn't have access to the library, and I went with just basically the best book I could find on the topic. I also walked around the bookshops in Dublin, and there wasn't much choice. So in the end, I said, okay, the Kindle version of this book isn't that expensive, so I think it would be a good investment. But I understand if you don't want to get it. It's not a showstopper. I think maybe if some of you have got it and can share it, that might help. Anyway, the section I'd like you to read is Basic AI and Enemy Behavior. It just offers a different take on the what we've done today. It isn't very different, but it has a little bit more emphasis on C# coding. And also there's mentions about refactoring. It's just like a kind of like a paragraph there. It is very good. Yeah. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought I added it to the PowerPoint. Well, I can be suggesting that, but I do. The other book I selected for this, the physics book, is out there. So yeah. Yeah, no comment from me on that. just a minute, sorry. So I added the course to Brightspace. So this is the image and the description that goes with it, the name. So if you don't mind, please enroll, and we'll be moving all the grading and announcements onto that as well. So let me know if you have problems finding it. I think this should be there should be only this one with this image. Okay. Any questions from you about the maybe the final or the projects? I had a quick look through some of the outlines, but well, didn't have that much time to do it. But don't worry about the grading on those. Like I'm not going to be strict on this. This is more to make sure that you are actively thinking through the project idea, and well, hopefully, if you spend spend 2 hours thinking it through and writing it up in a reasonable way, then you will get your 10%. More importantly is that I want you to go through the experience of trying to get from A to B and coming up with a valid idea. I think some of you, or I can already say that some of you will find that you will run out of time, or you will not have enough time to do all the things that you are thinking about. But that's kind of like the fact of life for a lot of game development. So I'm not saying to limit your ambition, but try to be realistic at what your ability is, and just kind of like find your way through it. No. I just added. Well, I added the course a while ago, but in case you have trouble finding the course, because at the moment I think only one person or two are enrolled. So please add yourself to the course on Brightspace. It's at the end of the PowerPoint, but let me just flash it up again. Sorry. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, let me know if you have problems finding it. I was told that the image is probably the best way to make it kind of unambiguous. Okay, and any other things regarding navigation that you might be curious or? If not, then I'd say let's have a look at maybe doing a simple building of our own. Yeah. Okay, great. That's good to hear. Topical joke. Certainly hope so. There's a nice Brackeys tutorial about adding animation to nav meshes. So like basically adding your maybe that one would be worth having a peek at. I don't think we will have time to, maybe go into every implementation detail or everything, but that would be a logical thing to do. If you do plan to have some animated characters running around, then this would have to be interfaced with the agent and the navigation system. If that's the route you choose for your project as well, it's totally your choice. I want this to be a little bit on the side of a creative assignment, like you did. You kind of like wanted to go for whatever you felt you want to do and see if you can attain it. That's the kind of spirit I'd like to see in this whole thing. So next week I will get back to you about the outlines and like give you some feedback, and we will do a little bit of coding together. Actually, let's get started on that already, because I'd like to look at a specific problem. So let's go with this navigation city manager. See, we've built a city with 50 buildings. So again, this using functions functions are your friend. How about we want to build some other large object looming in the city area between a certain coordinates, for example. How would you go around that? Let's say that you have this vision of having large buildings, not just those little teeny little thin towers that maybe are not as epic as you'd like. Maybe you'd like to use scale this time. When you compare the tree tower block and the root tile, you'll see that there's some of them are the root tile is using rotations for the different objects, which we didn't do in the tree tower block. Some of you have, if you had the extra challenge, if you finished everything early. But what about scale? Like, would be able to use scale to make some of our buildings larger. Well, definitely, but then you need to be careful where you're scaling around. So yeah, well, I'm not gonna make do the whole job for you, but let's just start thinking about it. How would you manage overlaps with other buildings with that? Let's say that you have that's definitely what you can have many prefabs with different types. Yeah, exactly. But would that always be easy? Like, let's say if you create a spherical building, you'd have to make a little bit more effort about which blocks, because the blocks are cube. So well, in our sci-fi world, there's anti-grav engines, and so yeah, keep it in mind. Start thinking about this. I can maybe get started on something very simple. Let's try for like a very basic block that. Let's clone this nav tower block. Script. Strip it down. I think that would be I'll just get started. I'm not sure we'll finish, but let's just kind of like start thinking about it, because I think all of you will have to try to attack this kind of problem. I've seen some beautiful designs for larger buildings with nice art style. Well, you won't really do it with those little small 1 unit size blocks. So you definitely will have to. So that was nav tower block. Let's duplicate this. Let's call it nav test block. So we don't want to be using profiles for this. I just want to have, let's say that, okay, let's make it as simple as possible. No recursion. No material control, we just have it, the material that we assign to it. No max level, no recursion level. Just make it simple. No base prefab, it's not going to be spawning anything, it's just going to be one single model. We're just going to position it and set up its size. So actually public void initialize is one that we'd like to keep. So let's say int start x, int start y, start z. So we'd like to have a starting position for this block. For the final, you know, it's a very, yeah, it's I'm taking a lot of things into consideration. So like you know, if you are more artistically inclined and you know coding is not your forte, I will probably grade your effort higher. But you know, try to make an effort and you know, use what we've been talking about, at least parts of it. But I won't be grading like little kind of like stylistic things. As long as the code works, doesn't break, doesn't crash, then you know, I wouldn't worry too much. I'd really kind of like I'm more like. I wanted to use the opportunity, like be pragmatic and okay, do something you're passionate about. Like you are all creatives, you want to be in game dev. So you know, this is a sandbox example of you know like a kind of like a badly managed project where nobody knows what's happening. Like let's say these projects exist, and you know you have you know little bits of these aspects of Unity, maybe not so much about other ones. See what you can make of it. Like you know, indie game development. It's not necessarily you know always a fully controlled process. You know, I'm not saying you know, there are companies that it's not. It's not. I don't know, like I've been in once, so. But well, you know, like also try to be respectful that we spend some time, you know, going through over some things here. So you know, yes, make an effort. And it's pretty obvious, you know, like looking through the creative assignment, I can see, you know, who actually like made an effort and tried to do something. You know, you can see that fairly clearly. So I think that's always tends to be a big part of you know. So if you do have some time to, you know, after the whole thing is actually functional and looks the way you want it, have a go at reformatting, refactoring your code to make it look better, and drop a note that you did it here and here, and you know, like this will probably improve your, you know, improve your grade in the end. But like I wouldn't like really deduct too much on you know just the quality of the code. No. Okay, so let me just kind of get this problem started, and you can maybe continue it on your own time. So we'd like to call this function initialize from somewhere. Like, is this actually the best way to do it? I'm wondering. Yeah, let's call. In the beginning, it will not do anything. We'll resize it, position it, and update the city block array afterwards. So start x, start y, start z. We can go maybe with width, or just maybe to make it more consistent, and X and Y and Z. And that would be a good starting point already, because we know the extents of the building, and we know that we're going to have to fill the city array at appropriate locations. So recursion level goes. My mesh, this is all irrelevant now. We just want to put something in there and make sure that nothing gets built over this on top. What else is left? Awake. No, we don't need this. Now this conversion of the location, this will have to go into that function, but in what way? We will have to do this for all those variables that we've just provided. So if we provide start x in the world space coordinates, we need to know what array index it corresponds to. Do we need city manager? No, we don't even need any of this. I think we can actually delete all this from start. We don't care. What we would like is the way to maybe expose those. Okay, so mesh filter, mesh render, we deleted. I'd like to expose these parameters. So actually the easiest way to do it would be add two transforms, right? The start point and the end point. So start point, end point. And then in start, we will call this initialize function using those 2 points positions as they were provided. So start point position X, and then lots of copy and paste again. And I think it'll be time to finish soon, but let me just kind of give you a general idea. Okay. It's complaining a lot. Wall space position from float to okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's make these floats, and let's worry about the conversions later. Okay, and you see this mapping that's happening here. We're not touching the vertical coordinate because it starts at 0, and that's the 0 that's ground level. However, x and z are offset by 20 in this case, so we can probably make another function and refactor it a little bit so that in the end, what else would have to, any ideas, what else would go into this function? We'd have to make a call to what? We'd have to make a call to set slot. So yeah, think this through and try to come up with your own simple block that puts a mesh there, rescales it in a way that it fits between 2 points that you specify, and make sure that the city array is updated accordingly. That's a mini homework assignment. We'll go through this in class, but the sooner you start working on it, the easier it will be for your final project. Any more questions? Streaming, okay. Yeah, I was saying, okay, I'm not sure if it cut out before I was able to show what I was going for, but we'd like to go into start function and use the provided start point and end point to call this initialize function, which would have to first remap the positions to array coordinates, array index coordinates, and then run the checks, set slot positions, perhaps perhaps check slot as well, if you want to be really careful, to make sure that all this extent, all this area, it's like an area effect. So I just kind of gave you a free tip there. You probably will have to need to do something like this if you want to go outside of the code blocks that I've already provided to you. Okay, if you haven't submitted your outline, please do it today or tomorrow, and please enroll in the Brightspace. And I will see you next week. By email is fine, or yeah, that's fine. I've gotten a couple of links which actually didn't work, so I'm suspecting that maybe the repository was set to private. In this case, you have to add me as a collaborator. So DM me if that's the case, or I'll be in touch with you anyway. Now I have to run because in 5 minutes I have the other class. So yeah, well, see you next week. Take care. Bye.